This will most strongly resonate with people who are $100,000 in debt from their creative writing MFA at Columbia. Yeah. Better than food, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. Today's review is sponsored by the fantastic GoodwillBooks.com. They now have over 1 million items available on GoodwillBooks.com. That includes books as well as movies, video games, and music. They have an awesome selection for very reasonable prices. So you don't just have to buy books, you can buy any of the aforementioned. Plus, the prices are low and you get free standard shipping on every order. And you can feel good about it. Every purchase made on GoodwillBooks.com goes to provide free job services and career development support to people in the communities that they serve. So that's awesome. And last I checked, no guarantees now, but last I checked, there were several copies of Leaving the Atocha Station available. So you might want to rush over there and pick them up before they're gone. So if you're interested in getting some great deals on books with free shipping while helping people out with your purchase, I suggest you click on the link below. Thanks a bunch. Today is Leaving the Atocha Station by Ben Lerner. This was a recommendation from Mike Schutte in Detroit. Shout out, dude. Hope you're doing well. Thanks a bunch, Mike. Ben Lerner is a poet, novelist, and literary critic. Leaving the Atocha Station was his first novel, and it was published in 2011. It's a modern Künstlerroman. I'm butchering that, I'm sure, but a portrait of an artist novel. Portrait of an artist as a young man in this case. The Atocha Station is the big train station in Madrid. I've been there, it's beautiful. This is a solipsistic first-person narrative asking the question of the importance and relevance of art, and poetry in particular, in contemporary society, in the modern world, whatever. So it's about an American kid in his 20s named Adam who is going on a fellowship to Madrid to write a poem about the Spanish Civil War and Franco and all that. Who apparently America supported, by the way. Link to Ben Lerner Interview in the description below. Very interesting stuff. Just kind of, especially if you didn't understand the novel or what it was about. It's a very good supplementary material, so please check it out. But Adam, doesn't really write this poem that he's supposed to write. He mostly just gets drunk and high, and he just kind of navigates, he mingles. He gradually learns Spanish and develops relationships with Spaniards, kind of hypercritical in a humorous fashion of other Americans that he can spot trying to assimilate into Spanish culture. And there's a great passage where he's speaking poorly about them. Like with punks and posers and that whole thing. It's the same principle. And he's simultaneously kind of dating a couple of them, maybe, possibly trying to. One of whom is translating his poems. And he just keeps putting off this poem that he's supposed to write. His concern is experience as it relates to art and the authenticity of artistic experience. Like when he's viewing a work of art, is he really feeling it or is it just somehow manufactured? It's kind of this bird's eye view that he takes over himself and all of his relationships, where he's trying to determine what's real, basically. What is real as far as experience. He's totally neurotic, and he tries to be authentic and sincere by being self-deprecating, thus alleviating any actual responsibility for actually trying and failing artistically. He's constantly critical about his own position and actions in society and relationships, anxiously analyzing everything about them, and is always trying to convince us of his sincerity through his supposed unflinching honesty regarding his own shortcomings. Which, seems to be an attempt at just alleviating anxiety, even though he really never does just chill out. My wife said that all art is articulated anxiety. That's my favorite definition of art, actually. Yeah, articulated anxiety. Yeah. So while at first it's kind of funny, eventually it just sort of becomes annoying for me. And spoiler, in the end, he doesn't write anything. I mean, maybe he writes a few poems, but it's not the fact is you can be a genius and still not have anything to say. That's sort of what the novel struck me as at first. This character kind of saying, I'm insufficient. Here's all the reasons why. It's a laundry list. It's like, who cares? This will most strongly resonate with people who are $100,000 in debt from their creative writing MFA at Columbia. Yeah, if you like the whole overeducated, quarter-life non-crisis thing, it's for you. This is sort of a non-problem. I mean, it might be true, for sure. I think we can all relate to it, most definitely, but it's just sort of it's a question without an answer. And while that can be great for a lot of books, usually I prefer novels that are questions without answers or any kind of clean-cut, boxed-in statements, for sure. But the question has to be interestingly presented. I don't think it was in this for me. According to Lerner, in this interview I've linked to below, again, since you have this first-person narrator insisting that he's unambitious and doesn't have any real literary ability, kind of shirking any sort of responsibility in that way, even though he's actually written this novel, right? The question is, do we believe what he says? Just how much of a fraud is he? Is he actually totally incompetent or just insecure and it's all this like false modesty? The answer lies somewhere in between and it doesn't matter. So yeah, like Lerner says, he's this unreliable narrator. Well, to thicken the plot, he's also a compulsive liar. Now, while Lerner is not concerned with plot, and more power to him, it's certainly it's a very readable book and enjoyable frequently without being too concerned with plot. But to thicken the plot, he's a compulsive liar and he's a kind of an alcoholic and frequently high on tranquilizers and hash. One thing Lerner was criticizing about modern novels in that interview below is how they behave like television, how contemporary novels behave like television, which I completely agree with. I think it's awful because they're not television. Novels should be able to stand in that medium and it should be an evolution of complexity because that is it's a very complex form and it deserves to be utilized, you know? It's something about my own writing that I've experienced and really just cringed at. It's just, it makes me shudder. It feels like television, like bad television. I did enjoy the references and inclusion of film throughout the text. Orson Welles and specifically Antonioni's The Passenger, which is great, which the main character lies about having seen when this girl asks him if he's seen it. The Passenger is a film directed by Antonioni with Jack Nicholson. It's a great film that takes place in Spain. I watched it actually not too long ago. Again, yeah, cinematography is kind of legendary in that one. Jack Nicholson steals the identity of a dead man and usurps his persona, running through Barcelona and going to these meetings that have been scheduled. And the dead man turns out to be an arms dealer for some sort of revolution taking place. It's a great story. But here's where it all comes together. Jack Nicholson in that film is an imposter on a poetic journey through Spain, right? And the funny thing is the narrator hasn't seen this film. He hasn't seen the film that he's starring in, I think is as he puts it, if I'm correct. I'm not sure. But yeah, I thought that was clever. This is what Adam Gordon feels like, at least in the book. He's a poet staying in Madrid on the money from this foundation. He's supposed to write some poetry that is somehow connected to Spain's civil war. He doesn't really know or read any other Spanish poets other than Lorca. And he's afraid of being found out that he doesn't have anything pertinent to say or create. He begins to have this dissociated, kind of numbed experience due to all the medication he's taking in excess, starts having fits of insomnia and crying randomly. And you know, all these lies he's telling to these women start to like compound, and then it all comes out and they don't really call him on it. Nobody really cares or does anything about it. And that's kind of unbelievable in my opinion. It's a little bit of a stretch, but whatever. He once uses his credit card to take this girl he's trying to kind of revenge impress to the nicest restaurant in Madrid and then books a room at the Ritz. It's kind of funny, but in a sad way. Lerner is playing with the idea whether or not this is an autobiographical story or how much of it is, because there's obviously tons that was pulled from Lerner's real life, but he claims that it's an exaggerated version. That's fine. I mean, like, even if it wasn't, I mean, it's not like, there's no real risk happening in here. There's nothing risky in here if it was real, you know what I mean? So it's like, who cares? The only thing that would be very interesting if it were real to me would be if he was there during the bombings, which I don't know if he was, but the character is. The character is there for the 2004 Madrid train bombings. One would think that would be a horrifying kind of transformative experience, but it's not for him. It's sort of, he feels sort of detached from history in the making, right? Which is interesting. It's compelling. The main character posits the idea that art, ultimately, poetry specifically, but maybe he believes it applies to all art, I'm not sure, is unable to cause any real political change. Yet art or poetry remains fundamentally important nonetheless, for reasons that are difficult to describe. Ultimately, the book is not about anything like what the narrator says that poetry is about. It starts off great with Adam in the Prado in this museum, beautiful museum, changed me at least. But he's observing paintings, but he's also observing himself observing the paintings and his own lack of emotional response to these artworks. They don't do anything for him. And this in itself, that idea, that concept of not being, of them not having an impact on him is so much more fascinating to him than the art itself. Great beginning. And then he sees this man come in and look at these paintings, or in various works of art, I think. And each time he looks at one, you know, he stops and looks at it, and then he starts crying. He keeps crying after he goes to every artwork. And so much so that the guards are kind of like looking at him, and they start like following him from room to room, and Adam is also following him. So they're all kind of like following this guy, this random appreciator of art. That was funny, but you know, doesn't really go anywhere. This is sort of the thing. Aside from his astute observations, there's nothing interesting or admirable about the character. Not even in his failures. There's really nothing. He's just sort of pathetic in a way that's totally familiar to me, but I don't get much out of reading about it. It's like I know. I live it every day. It's kind of ambiguous. The whole novel is ambiguous, but it is occasionally funny. This is when he's invited to a party at a fancy house by some fancy gallery people. I'm going to read this in like Tim Ferriss's voice, right? It's kind of laced with Patrick Bateman. As we entered the party, I reminded myself to breathe. There were a lot of handsome people in the sweeping white-carpeted living room with minimalist furniture and monumental paintings on the carefully lit walls. Various people greeted us, and Teresa detached from me to kiss them, and I was acutely aware of not being attractive enough for my surroundings. Luckily, I had a strategy for such situations, one I had developed over many visits to New York with the dim kids of the stars. I opened my eyes a little more widely than normal, opened them to a very specific point, raising my eyebrows and also allowing my mouth to curl up into the implication of a smile. I held this look steady once it had obtained, a look that communicated incredulity cut with familiarity, a boredom arrested only by a vaguely anthropological interest in my surroundings, a look that contained a dose of contempt I hoped could be read as political, as insinuating that, after a frivolous night, I would be returning to the front lines of some struggle that would render whatever I experienced in such company null. The goal of this look was to make my insufficiencies appear chosen, to give my unstylish hair and clothes a force of protest. I was a figure for the outside to this life. I had known it and rejected it, and now was back as an ambassador from a reality more immediate and just. Very, very well done. And you know, Lerner must have been around my age, if not younger, when he wrote this thing. It is very, very astute. Quite impressive. Don't get me wrong. In his ability to articulate anxiety, I mean, Ben Lerner is a great writer, without question. But I mean, it's funny in the way that if you like Charlie Kaufman or like James Murphy in LCD Sound System, that kind of like self-conscious, if you like that thing, you're gonna love this. He really doesn't let himself off in the book though, at all. And sometimes it's really cringe. But I mean, it's like, he makes himself to be a kind of interesting, sort of interesting, but like kind of just completely helpless mess. I think it's supposed to be kind of a response in part to the Hemingway, machismo, American traveler archetype. But by the end of it, I'm just like, you really do need some adventure. Go fight a bull. Go fight a bull. I mean, Lerner is blurring the lines between fact and fiction, but the truth is, I mean, whether he did or didn't do the things in the book is inconsequential. That's the problem for me. There's nothing risky here, neither for the character nor for Lerner. It's just a diary of anxiety. I mean, very impressively articulated, don't get me wrong. But that's it. It seems to be that the book, like the narrator, is afraid of saying anything definitive, because to do so would require the responsibility and risk of being incorrect. My response to the book was Adam's response to the Prado's paintings. I got a lot more out of the Prado's paintings, I gotta admit. I love El Greco, who the narrator speaks poorly about in the book. It's not a bad book. It's very smart and well written. And Ben Lerner is probably a genius. But I didn't like it. I think I like my fiction more base. I mean, maybe it's comparable in some ways to Less Than Zero, but I just liked the horror of Less Than Zero more. The mounting dread in the space between the words, right? So better than food? Not for me, no. But if you like Jonathan Franzen and DF Dubs, boy, you're gonna love this. So have at it. Coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you very much for stopping by. I take all the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video to the show, and I place their names in this mason jar, and I pull out a name for every review that I do and send them a copy, a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. Right now it's a Rwandan, and it's delicious. If you'd like to get in on that and help support the show, you can go to patreon.com/betterthanfood and donate $5 or more per video. For $1 more, you get access to the patron-only reviews, plus all the reviews ad-free, plus a Better Than Friday newsletter, which is just a list of 5 different things that I send out every Friday. It could be books in the pipeline, music, films, changes week to week, articles, all kinds of stuff. If you think we have similar tastes, I think you'll get a lot of value out of that. Unfortunately, international shipping is not included. Sorry about that. Thank you very much to all the patrons and best of luck. Okay, here we go. Raimundo H. Thank you very much, Raimundo. Really appreciate it. You're going to receive Leaving the Atocha Station by Ben Lerner, plus a bag of delicious coffee. Hope you enjoy. Cheers. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and always remember, bring a book wherever you go. All right, take care of yourselves. Have a good night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.